Time has arrived to finally fire it up again. So first thing is to get the oil pressure up. Hit the oil accumulator button. Probably have to turn the gauges on. So now I do have oil pressure, about 10 psi. Slowly bleeding down. Fuel pressure. Alright, fuel pressure is up. Time to fire. I can't tell you how many times I get involved in a project. I'm trying to figure out a better way to do something, and then I come up with one, but then I wonder, why did it take me so long to figure it out? Problem I've got 4 gallons of gas in here, but I think it's bad because the way the engine runs, it starts to run fine, and then it drops off real quick, and then it comes right back, and then it drops off and it comes back, and sometimes it stalls right away. So I'm thinking it's the gas. I ran into this about 10 years ago. I had gas sitting in it over the winter, even though I had preservative in it. So I've got to drain the gas out, and there's a drain port right above the return line coming back to the tank. So I was going to try to take this off, put a hose on it, and suck it out. But the thing I came up with is, why not just take the return line that's coming back, put a line on that and run it to my gas can, and then turn the fuel pump on. Because I have the auxiliary fuel pump, I can run the pump as long as I want. I'm not locked into the ASD. Normally you wouldn't be able to do that because the ASD only turns the pump on for a second and then it's off again. But being that I have a fuel pump, auxiliary fuel pump switch, I can just use that to siphon the tank, or pump the tank dry, I should say. And I was made aware that not all of the tanks have this siphon port. The older ones didn't have that. Only, I think, 88 or somewhere in there, they changed over to add that in. So if you've got the level side from an 88 or newer, you should have that siphon port. But if you don't have the siphon port, you could just take the return line off, and that returns to the bottom of the tank. So you can actually just siphon the gas out right there. You can even do it, I don't know if it will feed through the fuel pump if the fuel pump's not running. But you can definitely do it from the return side. So just a tip, if you're looking to drain your gas tank and you don't want to pull the tank first, just siphon it out through your return line, and you should be good to go. So this is the setup I've got. I just put a hard line, or steel line. You can see how much fuel is being pumped. Not a whole lot, because you got to remember that although it's a big fuel pump, I think it's 340 liter per hour, the return line I think is a 1/4 inch, 5/16 somewhere in there. So we're not talking a huge line. And plus you've got a regulator in series. So the return line is not that big, but you've also got a regulator, fuel pressure regulator up on the engine compartment that's restricting the flow back. So whatever that's letting back through those internal passages is what you're getting back here. So it's going to take a while to pump. I'd say I've got about 2 gallons pumped already, and it's been 15 minutes. But sure beats pulling the tank and trying to do it yourself. After scratching my head for a while on why the engine was continually trying to stall, I went back through my schematics over and over, trying to find a wiring issue, figuring that somewhere in this mess of wires I screwed something up. And I was convinced that that was what it was, because I've got wires going everywhere. And I've been diligent about making schematics updated, but I just assumed that there was something inside that I was going to have to fix. So I went through it all, could not find any errors, everything looks good. So I ended up going up the road. There's an old-time mechanic up there. He's still in business, he's in his 80s, and he's got the older test equipment that would connect to this. He had a snap-on set up. Now I've got the Chrysler tester, but his snap-on was a little bit better, and he's more old school too. So anyways, he tried connecting to it and couldn't get a signal to come out of this and talk to his control, his snap-on control, the tester. So what he suggested was, if I have another SMEC, to change it out and see if that made any difference. And I changed it out, car fired right up, and it idled. It idled fast, but it idled without trying to stall. So that confirmed that I had a bad SMEC. I thought I would go over what a SMEC is, and it stands for Single Module Engine Controller. And basically, back in the 80s, the mid-80s, 84 to 87 I believe it was, they used a two-piece setup. One was for power, and that was up in the engine compartment, and the other was the logic part, and that's in the passenger compartment on the passenger cowl by the door. So in 88 they went to a single setup where they're both together, and they put them in this housing so that air would come in, flow across all the electronics, and then flow to the air cleaner. And if you take this off, it's a two-piece setup. So you got your power block and your logic. They're two separate deals, so you can mix and match without any problem. There's a chip in here that's normally sealed and you can't get at it, and this is when they change the programming, you're replacing this chip or sending a new program to it. So you can mix and match those. And so I was fortunate that when they told me I had a bad engine control, I was just able to swap parts out, swap the chip, and get it to work. So this is my SMEC, and this one has a chip from Front Wheel Drive Performance. The other one has one from Boost Button. But there's something wrong with this, that it tries to short out. Every 5 seconds it tries to kill itself. So I'm not sure if it's in the logic or in the control or the power part of it, but somewhere there's an issue. Either way, the chip's still good, so I can just swap that back and forth. The other one that I took, this one was in that one, so I swapped it out, and then I just put a couple screws to hold it in place, and it keeps this one from falling out. So you don't have to run the cover on there. The cover is only if you need the air to cool it, and being that I have an air cleaner located right next to it, it gets plenty of cooling already, so that's not an issue. The good news is it's white smoke, so that means it's coolant. I only got water, and there's still water in it right now. If it was blue, I would definitely know it. And of course you got a day with the wind blowing towards the garage, so that just caps it off even more. When I first pulled the valve cover, the inside of that cap was covered in pink foam, which is royal purple and water. Inside the valve cover I had a lot of it. You can see a little bit of it right here that's left, but the whole inside was just froth with it. So obviously there's water getting up into the oil. Interestingly enough, and of course I've taken most of the oil out of here, this oil looked good, except there was some water laying on top of it. It wasn't mixed like the oil that was in the top of the valve cover. You can see a little bit right here. It doesn't look terrible. It's mostly oil. There's a little bit of a foam in it, but you know, that looks like decent royal purple. Now up here you can see some foam right in that groove. I checked the torque on the head. They were all within about 3 foot-pounds of where they should be. So I'm a little puzzled as to what's going on, but I'm suspecting that I've got a crack in my head. That's all I can think of that would let coolant up into the head. So that's why I remembered that I have the little tank that collects all the moisture and crud in the oil in the valve cover and filters it out and sucks it back through the engine. So my suspicion started to become, okay, what happens if that tank fills? So I drained it, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of liquid in there, and it's not oily at all, but it is. I'm running distilled water with nothing in it, so you can see that it's definitely sucking water back through, and that would explain how it got into the intake. So now it's a matter of not leaking into the combustion chamber. It's being blown into the combustion chamber by coming through the intake passages, through the turbo. So the question now becomes, how is it getting up here into the head and steaming out to become moisture that gets into the oil separator tank, air oil separator. So my suspicion is we've got a bad head. Somewhere there's a crack in it, and that's gonna have to replace the head. I don't think it's a valve cover gasket. I'll know when I get the head off, but I just think that somehow that water is getting up into the top of the head, and that's where it's becoming moisture going down through all my intakes. So I've never heard of that before, but it makes perfect sense. I guess the way I could have done was to leave this intake pipe off and run the engine without this and see if it still smoked. That would have definitely told me whether the moisture is coming in here, but I'm suspecting that it is, so I'm going to go with the head. I shouldn't have water in the top of the head regardless of what's happening elsewhere. So somewhere I've got a problem with the head. When you're tapping, you can only go so deep So when you go in with a tap, you can see that I've actually touched the inside of the head, and that's as far as you can go. Otherwise you're going to end up ripping the threads out of it. So you can keep tapping until you hit that head. It looks to be probably almost an inch, 7/8, somewhere in there. You can get in. But it's enough, you should be able to get a bung on there, an adapter for the AN fittings. So I'm using this light sanding disc. I don't really know what grit it is or anything, but it's doing a really nice job getting all the ridges off, but it's not scratching the block at all. As you can see, my grooves should be going sideways, and these are going 90 degrees to it, so I'm not scratching that block in any manner. But it is getting the grunge off. Everything's going to be nice and smooth. So hopefully this head gasket will hold. I don't know what was wrong with the other one, but somewhere I've got a leak. One of the things I wanted to show that on our blocks, on the front corner, is a restrictor that has a 9/64 hole in it. So interestingly enough, this is not a turbo block. It's a common block from an 89, but I didn't know that the non-turbos also got this restriction. It looks to me like it's rising up out of its bore. It's got to be knocked back down in. But it does have a 9/64 hole in it. So if you've got a non-turbo engine that you're trying to make turbo, keep that in mind, that you need to put a restrictor in here if it doesn't already have one, so that you're not getting full oil flow up into the head. I don't know what the reason is to keep the oil out of the head, keep it in the engine, keep it in the turbo. I don't know, but they're in there. I assume that if you don't have one, you could probably make one out of a 9mm shell casing. Just drill out the primer pocket with a 9/64, expand it a little bit and pound it down in, and you'd be good to go. Alright, for the head, I'm using a different one. This one's green. Again, I don't know what the softness or hardness of these things are, or coarseness, but I tried them. The red one that I was using on the block seemed a little coarse. I tried it in here, and I was actually seeing lines. You can see right there's some lines on it. So I didn't want to use that on the head. So I tried the green one, and the green one shined up nice on the outside. I didn't have any scratches in it. And then I took it on the edge where it's not going to be critical. And here by the bolt, over here, and it's not leaving any scratch marks. So I guess that's what I'm going to use for the head, is the green one. So you might want to do the green one for the block as well if you're trying them. But again, I can't tell you what that one is. Now that I have the head cleaned, I have bad news. If you look right here and here, there are cracks. So my spare head is junk. So now guess I'm going to have to use the same head that I was using before, and see if I can get that to work. I'll clean it up real good, make sure there are no cracks in that, and we'll see where we go from here. So looking at the bottom of the head, got a few scratches here, but I don't see that being an issue. So I don't see why it would leak. The head was torqued to 80 foot-pounds using ARP studs. I don't see any major issues with the head. This is the head that I took out of the car. That was running, but I had water in the oil. So as you can see, I've cleaned it up with that sanding or cleaning disc. Picture of it. And to show how little abrasiveness that disc has, these are scratches from the locating pins, and you can see that it did not even take the scratches out, so that's a good thing. Now the only imperfection I'm seeing is right here. Almost looks like a crack, but I can't believe it is because it doesn't go anywhere. It's just a little little C shape. So I'm thinking we're okay because that gasket would seal, and that's not close to the combustion chamber. That's the only imperfection I see on the whole head. So I guess I'm going to reuse the old one and see what happens.